Hi, welcome back, guys. This is your friend Deku Fanfics with another fiction. What if Deku had the power to change size? Now, before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. If you more want video like this, now let's get into the fanfic. The sun filtered softly through the curtains of Izuku Midoriya's room, casting playful shadows that danced on the floor. At just 4 years old, Izuku was a bundle of energy and curiosity, always finding new adventures in the familiar surroundings of his home. Today was no different. The room was a small kingdom of toys, and Izuku was its intrepid explorer. He was particularly engrossed in an epic battle between his favorite action figures, their plastic forms clashing in a miniature skirmish atop his bed. His green eyes sparkled with imagination, narrating the grandiose conflict. But as his excitement peaked, something unexpected happened. A peculiar sensation washed over him, like a wave of tingles starting from his toes and sweeping up to his head. Without warning, the room around him began to expand. His bed, his toys, the very walls themselves grew taller, wider, larger. Or rather, Izuku realized with growing astonishment, he was shrinking. His heart raced as he dwindled down to a mere inch tall. The vast expanse of his room transformed into a colossal landscape. His once small toys now towered over him like skyscrapers, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly. Izuku stood in awe, the ground beneath him a sprawling expanse of carpet fibers that felt like thick jungle vines. The air around him was different, the sounds magnified in his tiny ears. Every creak of the house, every distant noise felt amplified. He took a few tentative steps, marveling at the sensation of being so small, yet feeling an unexpected surge of strength within his minuscule frame. Suddenly, a new sound reached him, the heavy, rhythmic thud of footsteps. They grew louder, each one reverberating through the ground like an earthquake. Izuku's heart skipped a beat as he turned towards the door. It swung open slowly, revealing the massive figure of his mother, Inko Midoriya. From his minuscule perspective, Inko was a towering giantess. Each of her footsteps sent tremors through the floor, the sound of her shoes hitting the ground echoing in his tiny ears. Her green eyes scanned the room, a look of concern etched on her face. She called out his name, her voice booming and omnipresent. "Izuku, are you okay? I heard a noise." In his shock, Izuku's concentration faltered. The world around him shifted again, and in an instant, he was back to his normal size, sitting on the floor amidst his scattered toys. Inko gasped, clutching her chest in surprise at his sudden reappearance. "Izuku," she exclaimed, rushing over to kneel beside him. "What happened? Are you all right?" Izuku, still wide-eyed and breathing heavily, managed to nod. I think I have a quirk, Mom. I shrank. Everything was so big." Inko's initial shock gave way to a soft, reassuring smile. She pulled him into a gentle hug, her worry easing into understanding. "Let's go see a quirk counselor, sweetie. They'll help us understand what's happening." A few days later, Izuku and his mother found themselves in the office of a quirk counselor. The room was filled with various tools and gadgets designed to test and analyze quirks. The counselor, a kind woman with warm eyes and a patient demeanor, introduced herself as Miss Nakano. "Hello, Izuku." "Hello, Mrs. Midoriya." Miss Nakano greeted them, motioning for them to sit. "Let's see what we can learn about your quirk, Izuku." After listening to their story, Miss Nakano brought out a small dollhouse and placed it on the table. "Izuku, why don't you try shrinking again and explore this dollhouse? It will help us understand your quirk better." Izuku nodded, concentrating hard. He felt that familiar tingle and watched as the world expanded around him once more. Within moments, he was small enough to fit comfortably inside the dollhouse. Nakano and Inko observed him closely, noting his increased strength and agility at this reduced size. "Fascinating," Miss Nakano murmured. "This is quite a unique quirk, Izuku." You'll need to practice controlling it. But I think you could be great hero. She handed the dollhouse to Inko. Take this home with you. Izuku can use it to practice. And remember, control is key. With practice, Izuku will learn to harness his quirk effectively. As they left the office, Izuku felt a mixture of excitement and determination. His journey as a hero was just beginning, and with his new quirk, he knew he had the potential to be something truly special. Izuku's excitement bubbled over as he prepared to showcase his newfound quirk to his friends at preschool. He imagined their wide-eyed admiration, the way they would marvel at his ability to shrink and grow at will. That morning, he eagerly told his classmates to gather around, ready to demonstrate. With a deep breath, Izuku concentrated and felt the familiar tingling sensation as he began to shrink. The other children watched with curiosity as he dwindled down to an inch tall, standing triumphantly among their towering forms. "Look, I can shrink," he declared, his voice small but filled with enthusiasm. However, the reaction was not what he had hoped for. Katsuki Bakugo, a boy with an explosive personality and even more explosive quirk, stepped forward with a smirk. "That's it? You just get small? What are you, Ant Boy?" The other children laughed, their interest quickly waning. Ant Boy, they chanted, following Katsuki's lead. Izuku's heart sank. The thrill of his discovery turned to dismay. His peers were not impressed. They were mocking him. But even at that young age, Izuku had a resilient spirit. Determined to prove the value of his quirk, he began practicing in secret, honing his abilities both at home and at school. Over the next few years, Izuku became proficient at using his quirk to avoid the bullies who relentlessly teased him. He learned to shrink quickly and quietly, slipping away unnoticed or hiding in places where they couldn't reach him. His resolve to become a hero, despite their taunts, only grew stronger. One day, during middle school, Izuku's quirk revealed an unexpected potential. He was defending a smaller boy from Katsuki, who had once again taken on the role of the aggressor. The boy cowered as Katsuki raised a fist, ready to strike. "Leave him alone, Kaken," Izuku shouted, stepping between them. Katsuki sneered. "Stay out of this, Ant Boy, unless you want to get hurt too." In that moment, Izuku felt a surge of determination. He shrank down to his smallest size and, with newfound strength, leaped up and delivered a powerful uppercut to Katsuki's jaw. The impact sent Katsuki sprawling onto his back, more stunned than hurt. The playground fell silent. Katsuki's cronies, usually quick to join in his bullying, stood frozen in shock. Izuku, still tiny but brimming with adrenaline, stared at his own hands in amazement. He had never felt such power before. As he grew back to his normal size, Katsuki picked himself up, glaring furiously, but with a hint of newfound respect. "You got lucky," he muttered, walking away. Izuku realized that the smaller he became, the stronger he got. This discovery fueled his training sessions. He spent hours practicing, experimenting with his size and strength in the safety of his home. Each day, he grew more confident in his abilities. Years later, in the halls of middle school, Izuku was no longer the timid boy who ran from bullies. He had become adept at using his quirk in ways that left his peers in awe. Even Katsuki, though still competitive and brash, acknowledged Izuku's strength in his own way. Izuku's dream of becoming a hero seemed more attainable with each passing day. He knew he had a long way to go, but with his unique quirk and unwavering determination, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. New alliances and old enemies. The second last year of middle school had begun, a year that carried the weight of anticipation and anxiety for many students. For Izuku Midoriya, it was a year that marked the culmination of years of practice and growth. His quirk had become an integral part of who he was, and his ability to shrink rapidly was now almost second nature. Despite this, he knew that strength alone wasn't enough. He had to be clever and strategic, especially with bullies like Katsuki Bakugo always lurking. At the start of the year, the buzz in the classroom was about the new student. Kushina Nakamura, a girl with an air of mystery and confidence, entered their class. Kushina was quirkless, but she carried herself with a kind of self-assurance that quickly became evident why. She was not one to be trifled with, ready to punch out anyone who dared to pick on her. What Izuku and most others didn't know was that Kushina was a martial arts champion, a fact that would soon reveal itself in an unexpected way. A few weeks into the school year, the inevitable happened. Katsuki and his gang set their sights on Kushina, mocking her for being quirkless. They circled her like predators, goading her into a fight. Kushina, with her fists clenched and a steely look in her eyes, was just about to oblige when something unexpected occurred. Unseen by everyone, Izuku had shrunk down to his smallest size, slipping through the crowd undetected. The first bully felt a sharp, surprising force on his back, causing him to fall flat on his face. The others laughed, thinking he had tripped, until the next bully screamed in agony as his underwear was yanked upwards in a humiliating wedgie. He ran away, red-faced and humiliated, leaving Katsuki to figure out what was happening. "Ant boy, come out and fight me like a man," Katsuki bellowed, his eyes scanning the area. But Izuku was nowhere to be seen. Frustration grew as moments passed without further incident, leading Katsuki to believe Izuku had fled. Just as Katsuki began to relax, he felt an intense, sharp pain at the roots of his hair. Izuku had climbed onto his head, gripping his hair with surprising strength and forcing Katsuki's head to jerk wildly. Katsuki tried to swat him away, but Izuku was too quick. With a well-placed punch, Izuku sent Katsuki sprawling to the ground. Izuku leapt off and returned to his normal size, standing tall and resolute. "How many times do I have to tell you, Kaken? Stop bullying people?" Katsuki scoffed, rubbing his sore scalp. He glared at Izuku with a mix of anger and grudging respect before gathering his goons and stalking off. The onlookers whispered among themselves, some in awe of Izuku's bravery, others in fear of Katsuki's inevitable retaliation. As the crowd dispersed, Izuku turned to face the girl he had defended. He expected gratitude, or at least a nod of acknowledgement. Instead, he found himself staring into Kushina's eyes, which were glowing with an intense fury. Her hair seemed to stand on end, and the very air around her vibrated with a murderous aura. Izuku instinctively took a step back, his heart pounding. I was just trying to help." "Asshole," Kushina shouted, cutting him off. With a swift and precise motion, she delivered a powerful roundhouse kick. Izuku barely had time to register what was happening before her foot connected with his side, sending him sprawling to the ground. The pain was immediate, but it was the shock that left him speechless. Kushina stood over him, her eyes still burning with anger. "I don't need anyone to fight my battles for me. Remember that." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Izuku to nurse his bruised side and wounded pride. The incident left a mark on him, not just physically but emotionally. It was a stark reminder that not everyone wanted to be saved, and that heroism wasn't always about stepping in. Sometimes it was about knowing when to step back. A few days after the incident with Katsuki, Izuku found himself thinking more and more about Kushina. Her strength, her confidence, and the way she had so effortlessly put him in his place intrigued him. During lunch, he saw her practicing some kicks on a couple of trees near the edge of the school grounds. The rhythmic thuds of her powerful kicks echoed through the air, drawing his attention. Gathering his courage, Izuku approached her cautiously. "Hey, Kushina," he called out, trying to sound casual. Kushina stopped mid-kick and turned her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as she saw him. Without warning, she spun around and launched a high kick aimed directly at him. Izuku's reflexes kicked in, and he jumped back just in time to avoid her strike. "Why did you do that?" he exclaimed, his heart racing. "I don't have time to chat," Kushina replied bluntly, turning back to the trees and resuming her kicks. "You can either train with me or leave." Izuku hesitated. Training with her was a daunting prospect, but he couldn't deny his curiosity and desire to improve. "All right," he said, stepping forward. "I'll train with you." Kushina didn't acknowledge his agreement with words. Instead, she simply gestured for him to join her. They began with basic drills, Kushina demonstrating various kicks and punches, while Izuku tried to keep up. It quickly became apparent that, even with his quirk, he was no match for her. Her reflexes and training were impeccable, and she effortlessly countered his every move. "Use your quirk if you want," she said nonchalantly after a particularly one-sided bout. Izuku shrank down to his smallest size, hoping to catch her off guard. But Kushina's sharp eyes tracked his movements with ease. She dodged his attacks and delivered precise blows that sent him sprawling time and again. Each failure stung, but Izuku's determination only grew. "You're relying too much on your quirk," Kushina said bluntly after yet another defeat. "Until you can knock me down without it, you can't use it anymore." Izuku looked at her in surprise. "But my quirk is my strength. Without it, how can I?" "Strength isn't just about your quirk," she interrupted. "It's about skill, strategy, and understanding your opponent. You need to learn how to fight without relying on your quirk. Only then will you truly become strong." Her words struck a chord with Izuku. He realized that she was right. He had been using his quirk as a crutch, relying on it to compensate for his lack of training. If he wanted to become a true hero, he needed to develop his skills and abilities beyond his quirk. The days that followed were grueling. Every lunchtime, Izuku and Kushina would meet at the same spot, and she would put him through a relentless training regimen. Kushina's training was tough and uncompromising, pushing Izuku to his limits and beyond. They worked on strength, speed, and endurance, but most importantly, they focused on technique. Izuku found himself constantly being knocked down, but he always got back up. Each fall was a lesson, each defeat a stepping stone to improvement. His body ached from the rigorous training, but he could feel himself growing stronger. His reflexes sharpened, his movements became more fluid, and he began to anticipate Kushina's attacks better. Kushina's approach was harsh, but Izuku could see the results. Slowly but surely, he was improving. He could last longer in their bouts, land a few hits, and even occasionally force her to block instead of dodge. Yet, despite his progress, he still couldn't knock her down. One particularly hot afternoon, as sweat dripped from their brows and the sun beat down mercilessly, Izuku felt a breakthrough coming. They were sparring as usual, with Kushina launching her precise, powerful kicks. Izuku dodged and parried, trying to find an opening. He noticed a slight shift in her stance, a fraction of a second where she was off balance. Summoning all his strength, he moved in quickly, feinting to the left before darting right. Kushina reacted, but this time Izuku was faster. He delivered a powerful punch to her midsection, followed by a sweep to her legs. For the first time, Kushina stumbled and fell to the ground. Izuku stood there, panting and wide-eyed. He had finally done it. Kushina picked herself up slowly, a small, rare smile playing on her lips. "Not bad, Midoriya," she said, brushing off the dirt. "You've earned the right to use your quirk again." Izuku grinned, a sense of accomplishment washing over him. "Thanks, Kushina. I couldn't have done it without your help." "Don't get too cocky," she warned, though her tone was lighter. "This is just the beginning. If you want to be a hero, you need to keep pushing yourself." Izuku nodded, fully aware of the truth in her words. The road to becoming a hero was long and arduous, but with Kushina's help, he felt more prepared than ever to face the challenges ahead. As they walked back to school, side by side, Izuku felt a newfound respect for Kushina. She had taught him more than just how to fight. She had taught him the value of hard work, determination, and the importance of not relying solely on his quirk. These lessons would stay with him, guiding him as he continued his journey to becoming a hero. A few months had passed since Izuku began his intense training sessions with Kushina. Lunchtimes and recesses had become his battleground, the playground his dojo. Each day, the routine was the same: rigorous sparring sessions under the watchful eyes of his fierce mentor. Though he had yet to win a single match, each defeat was a lesson, each bruise a testament to his growing strength and skill. Izuku had started to learn more about Kushina, though she rarely spoke about herself. One day, as the sun hung high in the sky and the heat of their training session took its toll, Kushina and Izuku took a brief break under the shade of a large oak tree. The ground beneath them was cool, a welcome relief from the intensity of their sparring. Izuku lay on his back, staring up at the leaves swaying gently in the breeze, while Kushina sat with her knees drawn to her chest, a thoughtful expression on her face. After a moment of silence, Kushina broke the stillness. "Izuku," she began, her voice unusually soft, "there's something I want to tell you." Izuku turned his head to look at her, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "What is it, Kushina?" She took a deep breath, her gaze distant as she gathered her thoughts. "I never really talk about my parents, but I think you should know about them. My mother, Mido, was known as the Chain Hero, and my father, Hashirama, was the Wood Hero." Izuku's eyes widened. "I've heard of them. They were amazing heroes." Kushina nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "They were. But what made them truly special wasn't just their powers or their hero work. They dedicated a lot of their time to charity and trying to help villains reform and integrate into society." Izuku listened intently as Kushina continued, her voice steady but laced with emotion. One day, they were helping a mid-tier villain who wanted to turn over a new leaf. This villain had been trying to escape their old life and become a better person. My parents believed in them and offered their support. She paused, her hands clenching into fists. But the villain's old boss didn't like that. He saw my parents' efforts as a threat to his control. So, he targeted them. My parents were killed because they were trying to help someone. That led me moving to this town to live with my grandparents, Tsunade and Dan. Izuku felt a pang of sadness and anger on her behalf. "I'm so sorry, Kushina. That's terrible." Kushina's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but her voice remained strong. "After my parents died, the villain they were helping came forward. They couldn't bear the guilt and wanted to honor my parents' belief in them. They helped the police and the Hero Commission catch their old boss. All because my parents believed in them." Izuku sat up, his heart heavy with the weight of her story. "Your parents were incredible, Kushina. They made a real difference." Kushina nodded, her expression resolute. "That's why I train so hard, why I push you so much. I want to honor their memory, to live up to the ideals they stood for. They believed in helping people, no matter who they were or what they'd done. I want to be a hero who can do the same." Izuku reached out, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You will, Kushina. You're already on your way. And I'm here to help you, just like you're helping me." Kushina looked at him, a genuine smile breaking through her tough exterior. "Thanks, Izuku. That means a lot." As they resumed their training, the bond between them felt stronger than ever. Kushina's story had given Izuku a deeper understanding of her strength and determination. He admired her even more, knowing the pain she carried and the legacy she aimed to uphold. Together, they continued their journey, driven by the same unwavering goal: to become heroes who could make a real difference in the world. Kushina was relentless, and each sparring session pushed Izuku to his limits. He was getting better, managing to land a few hits here and there, but her reflexes and technique still overwhelmed him. Despite the constant beatings, Izuku's respect for Kushina only grew. Her strength, both physical and emotional, was something he aspired to match. In his quest to improve, Izuku began to experiment with his quirk in new ways. He developed a fighting style that involved rapidly shrinking and growing, aiming to disorient his opponents. The technique showed promise, but it also had its drawbacks. The rapid changes in size left him dizzy and off balance, a weakness Kushina exploited without mercy. The training was grueling. Every lunchtime, Izuku would join Kushina by the large trees at the edge of the playground. She would be there, her face set in a determined scowl as she delivered powerful kicks to the thick tree trunks. The impact of her blows echoed through the air, leaves rustling with each strike. "You're late," she would say without turning, her tone as hard as her kicks. "Sorry," Izuku would reply, quickly dropping his bag and getting into position. They would start with basic drills: punches, kicks, blocks, and dodges. Kushina's movements were fluid and precise, a testament to her martial arts training. Izuku struggled to keep up, his own movements clumsy and slow in comparison. Every time he thought he was getting the hang of it, Kushina would up the intensity, pushing him to the brink of exhaustion. "Don't rely on your quirk," she would snap whenever he tried to shrink mid-fight. "Focus on your technique." Izuku's body ached after each session, but he welcomed the pain. It was a sign that he was growing stronger. He practiced at home as well, working on his form and trying to perfect his rapid size-changing technique. However, the dizziness from the rapid changes continued to be a problem. One day, after a particularly brutal training session, Izuku managed to convince Kushina to come over to his house for dinner after school. He knew it was a long shot, but he wanted her to see a different side of his life. "Come on, it'll be fun," he had said, wiping sweat from his brow. "My mom's a great cook, and she loves meeting new people." Kushina had hesitated, her tough exterior momentarily faltering. "Fine," she had finally agreed, much to Izuku's surprise and delight. That evening, Inko Midoriya was over the moon to meet Izuku's new friend. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and she welcomed Kushina with open arms. The Midoriya household was small but cozy, filled with warmth and the delicious aroma of home-cooked food. Inko had prepared a feast, eager to make a good impression. "Oh, you must be Kushina," Inko exclaimed, pulling her into a hug. "Izuku has told me so much about you. Come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready." Kushina tried to maintain her usual cool demeanor, but Inko's warmth and motherly charm quickly began to break down her defenses. By the time dinner was served, even Kushina couldn't resist smiling a little. They sat around the small dining table, plates heaped with food. Inko's stories about Izuku's childhood brought laughter and warmth to the evening. Kushina listened intently, occasionally glancing at Izuku with a newfound curiosity. "He's always been such a determined boy," Inko said, her eyes shining with pride. "Always pushing himself, always striving to be better." At one point, Inko, in her exuberance, draped an arm around Kushina, pulling her into a hug. Izuku seized the moment to snap a picture, capturing the rare sight of Kushina with a genuine, albeit small, smile. When she noticed what he had done, her eyes promised retribution. Izuku gulped, knowing he would pay for it later, but feeling that it was worth it. The dinner went on, filled with stories, laughter, and the sound of clinking utensils. Inko's genuine affection and care melted some of the ice around Kushina's heart. She found herself enjoying the evening more than she had anticipated, feeling a sense of warmth and belonging that she hadn't felt in a long time. After the hearty dinner, Inko excused herself to the kitchen, leaving Izuku and Kushina to explore the rest of the house. With a sense of nervous excitement, Izuku led Kushina down the hallway to his room. He pushed open the door, revealing a space that was both his sanctuary and his hero shrine. The walls were covered with posters of pro-heroes, the largest and most prominent being of All Might, Izuku's idol. Shelves lined with action figures, hero memorabilia, and notebooks filled with hero analysis covered one side of the room. It was a shrine dedicated to his passion and dreams, a testament to his unwavering dedication to becoming a hero. Kushina stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. She walked over to one of the shelves, picking up an All Might action figure and examining it closely. A small, knowing smirk played on her lips as she took in the sheer volume of hero-related items. "Wow, Midoriya," she said, her tone teasing but not unkind. "You're really into this hero stuff, huh?" Izuku, who had been nervously lingering by the door, flushed slightly. "Why, yeah, I guess you could say that. It's kind of my thing." Kushina placed the action figure back on the shelf and turned to face him, her smirk widening. "Kind of. This room looks like a hero museum. I knew you were determined, but this is something else." Izuku rubbed the back of his neck, a sheepish grin spreading across his face. "I just really want to be a hero. All Might's been my inspiration for as long as I can remember." Kushina's eyes softened slightly as she looked around the room again. Despite the teasing, she couldn't help but feel a sense of respect for Izuku's dedication. His room was a reflection of his dreams and the hard work he put into achieving them. She knew that kind of passion wasn't something to be mocked, even if it did provide ample material for teasing. "You know," she said, crossing her arms and leaning against the wall, "I think I'll have to tease you about this later. But for now, it's kind of impressive. Obsessive, but impressive." Izuku chuckled, feeling a bit more at ease. "Thanks, I think." Kushina shrugged, her smirk turning into a genuine smile for a brief moment. "Just don't let it go to your head, hero nerd." Izuku laughed, the tension in the room dissipating. "I'll try my best." The two stood there for a moment, the room filled with the silent acknowledgement of their growing friendship. Despite the tough exterior and relentless training, Kushina was beginning to see the depth of Izuku's character. And Izuku, in turn, appreciated the way Kushina pushed him to be better, both in their training and in understanding himself. "I want to show you something really cool," Izuku said, before going to set up his laptop on the bed with a movie ready to play. He then arranged small toy cars in front of the screen, creating a makeshift drive-in theater scene. Turning to Kushina, he grinned. "Do you trust me?" Kushina raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "Yeah, I guess." Izuku placed a hand on her shoulder and activated his quirk, shrinking them both down to a tiny size. Kushina took a moment to get her bearings, her eyes wide as she looked around at the now gigantic room. The bed loomed above them like a mountain, the laptop screen a towering monolith. "Whoa," she breathed, taking in the surreal transformation. She then noticed Izuku smirking at her and promptly punched him upside the head. "Don't look so smug." Izuku laughed, rubbing his head. "Sorry, couldn't help it." They began their climb up the towering bed, their tiny forms making the journey feel like a mini adventure. Reaching the top, they navigated the soft landscape of the blanket and made their way to the toy cars parked in front of the giant laptop screen. "Pick a car," Izuku said, gesturing to the small vehicles. Kushina chose a sleek, roofless convertible and climbed into the driver's seat. Izuku darted over to the laptop, using his enhanced strength to jump onto the space bar and start the movie. The screen flickered to life, casting a warm glow across the room. Returning to the car, Izuku settled into the passenger seat beside Kushina. "This is pretty cool, right?" he asked, looking up at the enormous screen. Kushina nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Yeah, this is pretty awesome." As the movie played, the sound and visuals enveloped them, creating an immersive experience. Kushina occasionally glanced over at Izuku, observing his innocent enthusiasm. A blush crept up her cheeks, and without thinking, she lightly punched him upside the head again. Izuku turned to her, confused. "What was that for?" Kushina quickly faced the screen, feigning innocence. "Nothing. Just watch the movie. Izuku shook his head, chuckling softly. The rest of the movie passed in comfortable silence, both of them enjoying the unique perspective provided by Izuku's quirk. The immense size of the screen made every scene more dramatic, every sound more powerful. When the credits began to roll, Izuku stretched and looked over at Kushina. "What did you think?" Kushina leaned back in the tiny car, a content expression on her face. "It was amazing. Thanks for showing me this, Izuku." "Anytime," he replied with a grin. "I'm glad you enjoyed it." They sat there for a moment, basking in the afterglow of their mini-adventure. The giant world around them felt less intimidating now, more like a playground for their imaginations. As they began to grow back to their normal size, Kushina gave Izuku a genuine smile. "You know, you're not so bad, Midoriya." Izuku laughed, feeling a warm sense of accomplishment. "Thanks, Kushina. That means a lot." The evening had turned out to be a success, not just because of the movie or the fun experience, but because it had brought them closer together. Their bond, forged in training and solidified through shared moments like these, was growing stronger with each passing day. As they returned to the living room, Inko greeted them with a smile. "Did you two have fun?" Kushina nodded, her usual tough exterior softened. "Yeah, we did. Thanks for having me over." Inko beamed, her eyes twinkling with happiness. "You're welcome anytime, Kushina." Izuku walked her to the door, the air between them lighter than it had ever been. "See you tomorrow for training." "Of course," Kushina replied, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. But before she left, she leaned in close, her voice low and teasing. "And don't think I've forgotten about that picture." Izuku laughed nervously, scratching the back of his head. "Yeah, I figured. I'll make it up to you, I promise." As Kushina walked away, Izuku watched her go, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Despite her tough exterior and harsh training methods, she had become a significant part of his life. Her presence had pushed him to grow stronger, both physically and emotionally. A few days after the movie night at Izuku's house, Kushina approached him after school with a peculiar look on her face. Before he could ask what was going on, she grabbed him by the front of his shirt and began to drag him through town. "Kushina, what's going on?" Izuku asked, stumbling to keep up with her brisk pace. "You'll see," she replied curtly, her grip firm and determined. They walked in silence, the bustling sounds of the town fading as they moved toward the outskirts. The journey took them to a small but charming house nestled in a quiet neighborhood. The garden was well kept, with vibrant flowers and neatly trimmed hedges, hinting at the care taken by its residents. "This is my grandparents' house," Kushina said, finally letting go of Izuku's shirt and leading him up the front steps. Before Izuku could fully process the situation, Kushina pushed open the door and ushered him inside. The interior was warm and inviting, filled with the comforting sense of home-cooked meals and the faint aroma of fresh flowers. Pictures adorned the walls, telling the story of a loving family. Dan, Kushina's grandfather, greeted them with a kind smile. He was a tall man with a gentle demeanor, his hair a distinguished silver. "Hello, you must be Izuku. It's a pleasure to meet you." Izuku bowed politely. "Nice to meet you too, sir." Tsunaade, Kushina's grandmother, appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her presence was immediately commanding, her eyes sharp and knowing. "So this is the famous Izuku I've heard so much about," she said, her tone teasing. Kushina rolled her eyes. "Grandma, don't embarrass him." Tsunaade smirked. "Oh, I'm just getting started." She turned to Izuku, her expression softening slightly. "Welcome to our home, Izuku. Make yourself comfortable." The evening unfolded with a mixture of warmth and light-hearted teasing. Dan was kind and engaging, sharing stories and making Izuku feel at ease. Tsunaade, on the other hand, spent most of the night gently ribbing both Izuku and Kushina. Her teasing remarks always accompanied by a twinkle in her eye. "So, Izuku," Tsunade said at one point, "how are you handling Kushina's intense training sessions? She can be quite the taskmaster, can't she?" Izuku chuckled nervously. "Yeah, she really pushes me to my limits. But it's making me stronger." Kushina gave a small, appreciative nod, her usual tough exterior softened by the familial setting. Dinner was a hearty affair, the table laden with delicious dishes that spoke of Tsunade's culinary prowess. Izuku couldn't help but marvel at the spread, feeling a sense of belonging that warmed his heart. As the evening drew to a close, Tsunade decided it was time for a photo. She pulled out an old-fashioned camera and positioned it on a tripod. "All right, you two, come here," she commanded, her tone leaving no room for argument. Kushina tried to protest. "Grandma, do we really need a picture?" Tsunade's eyes narrowed slightly, her fierce glare enough to quell any further resistance. "Yes, we do. Now, come on." With a resigned sigh, Kushina stood next to Izuku, who was feeling both amused and slightly nervous. Tsunade moved in and, with surprising strength, squeezed the two together, her arms wrapping around them both. "Smile," Tsunade instructed, her voice firm but affectionate. The camera clicked, capturing the moment. Kushina, despite her initial resistance, couldn't help but smile slightly, and Izuku's grin was wide and genuine. The flash illuminated the room, freezing the memory in time. "Perfect," Tsunade declared, stepping back and giving them both an approving nod. "Now, wasn't that so bad?" Kushina huffed, but didn't argue. "Thanks for dinner, Grandma. It was great, as always." Dan and Tsunade walked them to the door, bidding them farewell. "You're welcome here anytime, Izuku," Dan said warmly. "Don't be a stranger," Tsunade added with a wink. As they walked back toward town, Izuku felt a sense of warmth and gratitude. "Your grandparents are really nice," he said, glancing at Kushina. "Yeah, they are," Kushina replied, a rare softness in her voice. "Thanks for coming with me tonight." "Anytime," Izuku said with a smile. It was fun. Their bond, strengthened by the shared evening with Kushina's family, felt more solid than ever. As they parted ways, Izuku felt more determined than ever to continue growing stronger, both as a hero and as a friend. That night, as he lay in bed, Izuku couldn't help but think of the day's events. Meeting Kushina's grandparents had given him a deeper understanding of her, and he felt honored to be included in that part of her life. The journey to becoming a hero was filled with unexpected moments and connections, each one shaping him in ways he never anticipated. With a contented sigh, Izuku closed his eyes, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that he had the support of his friends and the strength of their shared XxAverageZombiexX. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the playground where Izuku and Kushina were sparring. The area was quiet except for the rhythmic sounds of their movements and the occasional grunt of effort. Today, their training session was particularly intense, both of them pushing each other to the limits of their abilities. Izuku and Kushina squared off, the ground beneath them marked by their previous bouts. Kushina's eyes were sharp, focused entirely on Izuku. He mirrored her intensity, ready to show her how far he had come. "Ready, Midoriya?" Kushina asked, her stance firm and unwavering. "Always," Izuku replied, a determined grin spreading across his face. They launched into action, their movements a blur of strikes and counter-strikes. Kushina's kicks were fast and powerful, forcing Izuku to stay on his toes. He dodged and blocked, looking for an opening. Summoning his quirk, Izuku shrank down to his smallest size, hoping to catch her off guard. In his tiny form, Izuku darted around Kushina, aiming quick jabs at her legs. She anticipated his movements, however, and her reflexes were as sharp as ever. Despite his size, she could track him with remarkable precision. a testament to the countless hours they had spent training together. She countered with precise kicks, forcing Izuku to stay mobile. Izuku decided to switch tactics. He grew back to his normal size and charged at her, using the momentum to deliver a powerful punch. Kushina sidestepped gracefully, grabbing his arm and flipping him over her shoulder. He hit the ground hard but rolled back onto his feet, undeterred. "Not bad," Kushina remarked, a hint of a smile on her lips. "But you'll have to do better than that." Izuku grinned, his determination unwavering. He shrank down again, this time using his enhanced speed to circle around her rapidly. The world seemed to blur as he moved, his tiny form darting in and out of her reach. He aimed for her midsection, hoping to land a decisive blow. But Kushina was ready. She pivoted on her heel, her eyes tracking his movements with uncanny precision. As Izuku closed in, she delivered a swift, low kick that swept him off his feet. He tumbled across the ground, momentarily disoriented by the impact. "Gotcha," she said, her voice calm and confident. Izuku scrambled to his feet, growing back to his normal size. He could feel the strain of the fight, but his resolve only grew stronger. He launched into another series of attacks, mixing in rapid size changes to keep her off balance. He shrank again, this time focusing on her blind spots. He darted between her legs, delivering quick jabs to her calves and thighs. Each punch landed with surprising force, causing Kushina to adjust her stance. Taking advantage of the opening, Izuku grew back to his normal size and aimed a powerful uppercut at her chin. Kushina blocked the punch just in time, using the momentum to spin and deliver a roundhouse kick. Izuku saw the kick coming and shrank at the last second, causing her to miss. He used his small size to his advantage, leaping onto her shoulder and growing back to his normal size, intending to throw her off balance. However, Kushina was ready. She grabbed his arm mid-transformation and used his momentum against him, flipping him over and pinning him to the ground. Izuku struggled to break free, but Kushina's grip was firm, her training and reflexes far superior. "Nice try," she said, panting slightly but maintaining her hold. "But you're still too predictable with your quirk." Izuku lay on the ground, panting and wincing from the impact. Despite the pain, he felt a sense of accomplishment. He had pushed Kushina harder than ever before, and even though he lost, he knew he was improving. "Thanks, Kushina," he said, accepting her outstretched hand and pulling himself up. "I'll keep working on it." "I know you will," she replied, her smile softening. "That's what makes you a great training partner." As they stood there, catching their breath, Izuku felt a deep sense of camaraderie. Their sparring matches were more than just training. They were a testament to their friendship and their shared determination to become the best heroes they could be. A few days later, after another intense training session, Kushina and Izuku were cooling down, sitting under the shade of a tree. Kushina glanced at Izuku, hesitating for a moment before speaking. "Hey, Izuku," she began, a bit more casually than usual. "My grandparents and I are planning a trip to Tokyo this weekend to visit my family's graves. I was wondering if you'd like to come with us." Izuku looked up, surprised by the offer. "Really? I'd love to, Kushina. Thank you for inviting me." Kushina nodded, a small, genuine smile appearing on her face. "Great. I think it would be good to have you there." The train ride to Tokyo was filled with a mix of excitement and quiet anticipation. As the cityscape gradually transitioned into the bustling metropolis of Tokyo, Izuku and Kushina found themselves captivated by the sights outside the window. The towering skyscrapers, neon signs, and endless streams of people were a stark contrast to their quiet hometown. Izuku leaned forward, his face nearly pressed against the glass. "Wow, Tokyo is incredible. I've read about it, but seeing it in person is something else." Kushina, sitting beside him, nodded. "Yeah, it's a whole different world. There's so much energy here." Tsunade and Dan, Kushina's grandparents sat across from them, smiling at the kids' enthusiasm. "We're almost there," Dan said, his voice warm. "I hope you're both ready for a meaningful visit." When they arrived, the group made their way to a quaint, traditional inn where they would be staying. The inn was nestled in a quieter part of the city, providing a serene retreat from the urban hustle and bustle. The tatami mats, sliding doors, and tranquil garden gave it an air of calm and reflection. Their first stop was the martial arts school where Kushina had trained. The dojo was a serene space, filled with the echoes of past battles and the quiet discipline of its students. Kushina introduced Izuku to a couple of her friends from the school, their eyes bright with curiosity and respect for the boy who had managed to keep up with Kushina. "This is Izuku," Kushina said, her voice carrying a hint of pride. "He's been training with me." One of her friends, a tall girl with sharp features named Hana, stepped forward. "Nice to meet you, Izuku. I've heard a lot about you. Care for a spar?" Izuku agreed and got into the ring with Hana before getting into a stance. "Ready?" Hana asked, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Izuku nodded, taking a deep breath. "Ready." The fight began with Hana launching a series of quick, precise strikes. Izuku dodged and blocked, using his quirk to rapidly shrink and grow, making his movements unpredictable. Hana adapted quickly, her reflexes sharp, but Izuku was determined. Hana attempted a sweeping kick, but Izuku shrank at the last moment, slipping under her leg and growing back up to deliver a solid punch to her side. She staggered but quickly recovered, launching a flurry of punches. Izuku shrank again, using his enhanced speed to dart around her and land several quick jabs. The onlookers watched in awe as the two continued their fast-paced duel. Hana, though skilled, found herself increasingly challenged by Izuku's unique fighting style. In a final move, Izuku shrank down and leaped onto her shoulder, then grew back to his normal size to flip her onto the mat, pinning her. Hana laughed, breathless but impressed. "Nice job, Izuku. You got me." Izuku grinned, helping her up. "Thanks, Hana. That was a great fight." The dojo erupted in applause, and Izuku felt a surge of pride. He had proven himself, not just to Hana, but to everyone watching, and felt one step closer to his goal of becoming a true hero. The next day, they visited the graves of Kushina's parents. The cemetery was quiet, the air heavy with the scent of flowers and the soft rustle of leaves. Kushina led Izuku to two modest headstones, each adorned with fresh flowers. "Mito and Hashirama," she said quietly, her voice tinged with reverence. "They were incredible heroes. They dedicated their lives to helping others, even villains who wanted to change." Izuku listened intently as Kushina spoke about her parents, her usual tough demeanor softened by the memories. She recounted how they had worked tirelessly to reform a mid-tier villain, only to be targeted by the villain's old boss. Despite their tragic end, their legacy lived on, inspiring others to continue their work. "They believed in redemption," Kushina said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They believed that anyone could change if given the chance." Izuku felt a surge of admiration and respect for her parents. He could see where Kushina got her strength and determination. Without thinking, he reached out and hugged her gently. For a moment, she stiffened, but then she relaxed, allowing the comfort of the embrace. "Thank you for sharing this with me," Izuku said softly. Kushina nodded, her eyes misty. "Thank you for being here." After their visit to the cemetery, Izuku and Kushina spent the rest of the day at the martial arts school. Kushina introduced Izuku to some more of her old friends, who welcomed him warmly. They all gathered in the training area, the anticipation of a good workout evident in their expressions. "All right, Midoriya, show us what you've got," Kushina said with a smirk, tying her hair back and stepping into a sparring stance. Izuku nodded, feeling both nervous and excited. He joined the group in their drills, moving through sequences of punches, kicks, and blocks. The rhythm of the practice was intense, and Izuku quickly realized how much he could learn from these experienced martial artists. During a break, one of Kushina's old friends, a boy named Makoto with a friendly demeanor and a strong build, approached Izuku. "Hey, Midoriya," he said, offering a hand. "I'm Makoto. It's good to meet you." Izuku shook his hand, smiling. "Nice to meet you too." Makoto glanced over at Kushina, who was busy demonstrating a complex move to another student. "You know, I'm really glad Kushina made friends with you. She's always been so focused and driven, but it seems like you've helped her lighten up a bit." Izuku blinked in surprise. "Really? I always feel like she's the one pushing me to be better." Makoto laughed. "That's just her way. But trust me, it's good for her to have someone like you around. You both balance each other out." Izuku felt a surge of warmth at Makoto's words. "Thanks, Makoto. That means a lot." They rejoined the group for more sparring matches, and Izuku found himself paired with Makoto. The two exchanged blows and techniques, pushing each other to improve. Izuku used his quirk to shrink and dart around, while Makoto's powerful strikes kept him on his toes. The friendly competition was invigorating, and Izuku felt his skills sharpening with each round. As the day turned to evening, the students gathered for a final bell, thanking the sensei for the session. The camaraderie and respect in the room were palpable, and Izuku felt honored to be part of it. Kushina walked over, a satisfied look on her face. "Not bad, Midoriya. You held your own." Izuku grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. "Thanks, Kushina. This was incredible." As they left the dojo, Makoto called out, "Take care, Midoriya. Keep training hard." Izuku waved back, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the experience. The day at the martial arts school had not only strengthened his body, but also his bond with Kushina and her friends. It was a day he would carry with him as he continued his journey toward becoming a hero. On the last day of their trip to Tokyo, Kushina and Izuku found themselves standing outside a bustling arcade. The neon lights flickered invitingly, and the sounds of laughter and electronic games spilled out onto the street. "I can't believe you convinced me to come here," Kushina said, a skeptical look on her face. Izuku grinned, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "Come on, Kushina. We've been training so hard. We deserve a little fun." Kushina sighed, but couldn't help a small smile from forming on her lips. "All right, but just this once." As they entered the arcade, the overwhelming sights and sounds enveloped them. Rows of games stretched out before them, each one more colorful and enticing than the last. Izuku's excitement was infectious, and even Kushina found herself getting caught up in the energy of the place. They started with a classic, the claw machine. Izuku eagerly inserted a coin and maneuvered the claw, trying to grab a plush toy. His first few attempts were unsuccessful, but his determination only grew with each failure. Kushina watched, amused by his persistence. "You're never going to get it at this rate," she teased. Izuku grinned. "Watch me." On his fifth attempt, the claw finally grabbed hold of a small, All Might plushie and lifted it to the prize chute. Izuku's face lit up with triumph as he retrieved his prize and handed it to Kushina. "Here, a souvenir," he said, beaming. Kushina rolled her eyes, but accepted the plushie with a small smile. "Thanks, Izuku." They moved on to the racing games, where Kushina's competitive spirit came to life. She easily outmaneuvered Izuku on the virtual track, laughing as she crossed the finish line ahead of him. "Looks like I've still got the upper hand," she said smugly. Izuku laughed, shaking his head. "I let you win." "Sure you did," she replied with a grin. Their day continued with more games, each one adding to the fun and camaraderie between them. They played skee-ball, air hockey, and even tried their luck at a dance game, where Kushina's martial arts skills translated surprisingly well to the rhythm-based challenge. As the afternoon turned to evening, They found themselves at the prize counter, exchanging their tickets for small trinkets and candy. Kushina couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth and contentment, despite her initial reluctance. "Okay, I admit it," she said as they left the arcade, the neon lights reflecting in her eyes. "That was actually fun." Izuku smiled, his heart full. "I'm glad you enjoyed it. We needed a break." Kushina nodded, her expression softening. "Yeah, we did. Thanks, Izuku." Their day at the arcade was a brief respite from their rigorous training and the emotional weight of their visit. It strengthened their bond, reminding them that even in the pursuit of their dreams, there was always room for a little fun and friendship. After returning from Tokyo, Izuku and Kushina wasted no time resuming their intense training regimen. The memories of the trip, the solemn moments at the graves, and the fun at the arcade all felt distant as they focused on their immediate goal, preparing for UA high school. The afternoon sun cast long shadows over the playground as they faced each other, the familiar tension of an impending spar hanging in the air. Izuku felt a new surge of confidence, ready to test out some moves he had observed and practiced briefly during their trip to Tokyo. "Ready, Midoriya?" Kushina asked, her stance firm and her eyes sharp. Izuku nodded, mirroring her stance. "Always." They launched into action, their movements a blur of strikes and counter-strikes. Kushina's kicks were as fast and powerful as ever, but Izuku had a new strategy. He focused on his footwork, incorporating a couple of swift, evasive maneuvers he had learned from watching Kushina's friends at the martial arts school. As Kushina aimed a high kick at his head, Izuku shrank down to his smallest size, darting beneath her leg and popping back up behind her. Instead of delivering a straight punch, he used a spinning backfist he had seen in Tokyo, catching Kushina off guard and landing a solid hit on her shoulder. Kushina staggered slightly, but quickly regained her balance, a glint of surprise and respect in her eyes. "Nice move," she acknowledged, rubbing her shoulder. "Where'd you learn that?" "Picked up a few things in Tokyo," Izuku replied with a grin, not letting his guard down. Kushina's expression turned serious again. "Show me what else you got." They continued to spar, with Izuku incorporating more of the techniques he had observed. He used his quirk to rapidly shrink and grow, combining it with the new moves to create an unpredictable fighting style. At one point, he executed a flawless sweep kick, tripping Kushina and forcing her to roll away to avoid a follow-up attack. Kushina, though impressed, was not one to be easily defeated. She adapted quickly, countering his new moves with her superior reflexes and experience. In the end, she managed to catch Izuku mid-shrink, pinning him to the ground with a swift and decisive maneuver. "You're getting better, Izuku," she said, slightly out of breath but smiling. "But don't think you can beat me that easily." Izuku grinned up at her, panting but exhilarated. "I know, but I'll keep trying." Kushina helped him up, and they stood there for a moment, catching their breath. The sparring session had been intense, but it had also shown just how much Izuku had grown. The trip to Tokyo had not only deepened their bond, but also enhanced their skills, bringing them one step closer to their dreams. "Good job today," Kushina said, patting him on the back. "Let's keep pushing ourselves. UA is just around the corner." Izuku nodded, determination burning in his eyes. "Right. Let's give it everything we've got." "You still rely on your quirk so much," Kushina, delivering a swift kick that Izuku barely dodged. "Focus on your technique." Izuku nodded, panting as he blocked the strike. I know, I'm trying." He redoubled his efforts, concentrating on his form and footwork. His quirk was a powerful tool, but Kushina's relentless training taught him that true strength came from mastering the basics. The progress was slow, but it was there. With each session, Izuku could feel himself getting better, his confidence growing. As the end of the school year approached, The atmosphere in their classroom grew tense with anticipation. One day, their homeroom teacher decided to ask the students about their future aspirations. "All right, class," he said, scanning the room with a knowing smile. "I know most of you have your sights set on becoming heroes, but let's hear it. What do you all want to do after graduation?" Katsuki Bakugo, never one to shy away from the spotlight, leapt to his feet. "I'm gonna be the only one from this school to get into UA," he declared, his voice brimming with confidence and a hint of arrogance. The class erupted in murmurs, some students nodding in agreement, while others rolled their eyes. The teacher chuckled, shaking his head. "Yes, Bakugo, we know you're aiming high." Then the teacher turned to Kushina and Izuku, a hint of skepticism in his eyes. "And what about you two?" Kushina met his gaze with unwavering confidence. "We're aiming for UA as well," she said firmly. A few students snickered, and the teacher raised an eyebrow. "Well, it's good to have goals," he said, a touch patronizingly. Izuku felt a pang of frustration, but forced himself to remain calm. He had learned to tune out the doubters and focus on his path. He glanced at Kushina, who seemed completely unfazed by the whispers and smirks. "Ignore them," she said quietly to Izuku. "We know what we're capable of." Izuku nodded, his resolve hardening. "You're right. We'll show them." Despite the mockery from some of their classmates, Izuku and Kushina's determination never wavered. They spent every spare moment training, honing their skills and pushing each other to new heights. Izuku focused on improving his physical abilities, running drills and strength training exercises that left him exhausted but exhilarated. Kushina was relentless, her own strength and skills serving as both inspiration and challenge. They sparred endlessly, each match a blend of strategy and brute force. Izuku's quirk was always in the background, a tool he used sparingly and strategically, but his reliance on it had lessened considerably. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling session, they collapsed onto the grass, staring up at the sky. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the playground. "We're getting there," Kushina said, her voice tired but satisfied. "Yeah," Izuku agreed, wiping sweat from his brow. "We are." The path to UA was filled with obstacles, but they faced them together, their shared goal uniting them. Izuku knew that with Kushina by his side, he was stronger and more determined than ever. As they lay there, catching their breath, he felt a surge of gratitude for her friendship and guidance. "We'll make it," Izuku said softly, more to himself than to her. Kushina glanced over at him, a small smile on her lips. "Damn right we will." With the end of middle school in sight and UA on the horizon, Izuku and Kushina's journey was just beginning. Their dreams of becoming heroes were closer than ever, and nothing would stand in their way. Izuku and Kushina faced each other, ready for one last sparring session of the day. This time, Izuku had decided to challenge himself by not using his quirk. "Ready, Midoriya?" Kushina asked, her eyes focused and determined. "Ready," Izuku replied, adopting a defensive stance. They launched into action, their movements fluid and precise. Kushina's strikes were swift and powerful, each blow requiring all of Izuku's focus and skill to block or evade. Despite not using his quirk, Izuku moved with newfound confidence, his training evident in every motion. Izuku ducked under a high kick and parried a series of rapid punches. He countered with a quick jab to Kushina's side, causing her to take a step back. Sensing an opportunity, he pressed forward with a combination of punches and kicks, each one pushing her further on the defensive. Kushina, however, was relentless. She recovered quickly, her movements becoming a blur of attacks. Izuku managed to block and dodge most of her strikes, but she was faster and more experienced. A feint to the left followed by a swift kick to his midsection knocked the wind out of him. He staggered but remained standing, determined to keep fighting. With a final burst of speed, Kushina delivered a low sweep that took Izuku's legs out from under him. He fell to the ground, panting and exhausted, but with a look of satisfaction on his face. He had put up a good fight, better than ever before. Kushina extended a hand to help him up, a proud smile playing on her lips. "You did great, Izuku. You're really getting good without your quirk." Izuku took her hand and got to his feet, breathing heavily but smiling. "Thanks, Kushina. I've been working hard." Kushina nodded, her expression serious but encouraging. "Now you just need more practice to include your quirk in fights without putting yourself in harm's way. You've got the skills. You just need to integrate them better." Izuku nodded, feeling a renewed sense of determination. "I will. Thanks, Kushina." They stood there for a moment, the bond between them stronger than ever. Each sparring session, each challenge, brought them closer to their goals of becoming true heroes. With Kushina's guidance and his own unwavering resolve, Izuku knew he was on the right path. Izuku and Kushina wrapped up the intense training session. Their breaths were heavy, and sweat glistened on their brows, but there was a sense of satisfaction in the air. They had pushed each other hard, preparing for the challenges that lay ahead. Izuku wiped his face with a towel and turned to Kushina. "Hey, Kushina, did you finish all the paperwork for the hero course? The deadline's coming up soon." Kushina hesitated for a moment, her expression shifting from one of determination to something more apprehensive. She took a deep breath before speaking. "Actually, Izuku, there's something I need to tell you." Izuku's curiosity was piqued. "What is it?" Kushina looked away for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I'm not entering the hero course. At least not right away." Izuku's eyes widened in shock. "What? Why not?" Kushina sighed, her gaze meeting his. "I know this might seem sudden, but I've been thinking about it a lot. I was offered a recommendation spot for the hero course through some of my parents' old friends. But after considering it, I decided to start in the general education course and then transfer to the hero course later." Izuku was taken aback, struggling to process her words. "But why, Kushina? You've trained so hard for this." Kushina nodded, her expression serious. "I know, and I still want to be a hero. But I feel that starting in Gen Ed will give me a more rounded education. I want to experience different aspects of UA and make sure I'm fully prepared. It's a decision I made after a lot of thought." Izuku was silent for a moment, trying to absorb the news. He respected Kushina immensely, and her decision, though surprising, made sense in its own way. I understand, Kushina. It's just, I didn't expect this." Kushina gave him a small, reassuring smile. "I know. It wasn't an easy decision. But I think it's the right one for me. And I'll still be there at UA. We'll still train together and work towards our goals." Izuku felt a mixture of emotions: surprise, respect, and a bit of sadness at the thought of not having Kushina by his side in the hero course from the start. But he knew that this was her path, and he had to support her. "I respect your decision, Kushina. I know you'll excel no matter where you start, and we'll make it to the hero course together." Kushina's smile widened, her eyes reflecting gratitude. "Thanks, Izuku. That means a lot. We'll both get there, one step at a time." As they packed up their gear and headed home, the bond between them felt stronger than ever. They were on different paths, but their ultimate goal remained the same. Together, they would overcome any obstacles and become the heroes they aspired to be. Kushina then got back into position for another spar, as Izuku did the same. The sun was casting a warm glow over the streets as Izuku and Kushina walked home after their intense training session. The exhaustion from their workout was evident, but so was their determination. They chatted about their goals and the upcoming entrance exams for UA, their excitement palpable. "Today was tough," Kushina remarked. stretching her arms. But we're getting stronger every day. Izuku nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. Yeah, I can feel it. We're going to make it into UA, I know it. As they turned a corner, their conversation was abruptly interrupted by a horrifying sight. A massive, slimy sludge villain emerged from the shadows, its grotesque form undulating menacingly. The villain's eyes locked onto them, and it lunged forward with a guttural roar. Instinctively, Izuku activated his quirk, shrinking himself and Kushina just in time to dodge the initial attack. They rolled to safety, regaining their normal sizes and preparing to fight back. We've got to be careful, Izuku said, his eyes focused on the villain. Stay behind me. Kushina smirked, her fists clenched. I don't think so. We do this together. Just as they were about to engage, a powerful gust of wind blew through the alleyway. Out of nowhere, All Might appeared, his larger-than-life presence dominating the scene. With a single, mighty punch, he scattered the sludge villain, its form splattering harmlessly against the walls. Don't worry, citizens, I am here, All Might declared, his booming voice filled with confidence. Izuku watched in awe as All Might expertly gathered the remnants of the sludge villain and sealed them into a bottle. His eyes lit up with an idea. Perhaps he could use his quirk to capture villains in a similar fashion. The thought filled him with excitement and possibility. All Might turned to Izuku and Kushina, his smile broad and reassuring. You two were very brave. You must have some great quirks if you weren't afraid of that villain at all. Kushina's expression darkened slightly at his words. She crossed her arms, clearly put off by the implication that their bravery was solely due to quirks. Yeah, thanks, she replied curtly. Izuku, noticing Kushina's reaction, tried to bridge the gap. Thank you, All Might. You were amazing. All Might gave them a thumbs up before tucking the bottle into his pocket. Stay safe, young heroes, he called out before leaping into the air, his powerful legs propelling him high above the city. As All Might disappeared into the distance, neither Izuku nor Kushina noticed the bottle slipping from his pocket, tumbling unnoticed to the ground below. They stood there for a moment, absorbing the incredible encounter. Did that really just happen? Izuku asked, his voice filled with awe. Kushina's expression softened slightly, but she still seemed annoyed. Yeah, it did. But it takes more than having a quirk to be brave. Izuku nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. You're right. But still, I think I've got a new idea for my quirk. Kushina raised an eyebrow, curious despite herself. Oh yeah, what is it? Izuku grinned. I think I can capture villains, just like All Might did with the sludge villain. As they continued their walk home, the excitement of the encounter with All Might fueled their determination even further. They knew that their journey was just beginning, and with each step, they were closer to achieving their dreams of becoming heroes. But unbeknownst to them, the sludge villain's bottle lay forgotten on the ground, a potential threat waiting to be discovered. The afternoon sun was beginning to dip towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the bustling streets. Izuku and Kushina, still energized from their earlier training session, walked through the city, discussing their strategies and plans for the upcoming UA exams. The streets were crowded, filled with the usual hustle and bustle of city life. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by a loud commotion. A crowd had gathered, and panicked voices filled the air. Izuku's heart raced as he and Kushina pushed their way to the front, their eyes widening at the sight before them. The sludge villain from earlier had re-emerged, and this time it had ensnared Katsuki Bakugo, who was struggling violently within its grasp. The so-called heroes stood around, looking hesitant and unsure, their faces masked of indecision. Izuku felt a surge of frustration and determination. Without a second thought, he grabbed Kushina's hand and activated his quirk, shrinking them both to a minuscule size. They slipped through the crowd unnoticed, darting forward with a sense of urgency. As they neared the villain, Izuku released his quirk, returning Kushina to her normal size, while he remained small and perched on her shoulder. "Let's do this," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the noise. Kushina nodded, her eyes steely with resolve. She sprinted forward, dodging the explosive blasts from Katsuki's trapped form. In one fluid motion, she leaped into the air, aiming a powerful punch at the sludge villain's eye. Simultaneously, Izuku jumped off her shoulder, delivering a precise punch to the other eye. The villain recoiled, its grip on Katsuki loosening momentarily. Kushina landed gracefully, taking a step back with Izuku back on her shoulder, both of them poised for the next move. "He's weakened," Kushina observed, but her voice was tense. The sludge villain, though damaged, began to thrash violently, hurling tentacles of sludge in all directions. The crowd gasped as the villain's attacks became more erratic. Kushina dodged a tentacle that lashed out towards her, while Izuku shrank down and leaped from her shoulder, darting around the villain's body to avoid the flying debris. "We need to keep him distracted," Kushina shouted, her fists clenched. Izuku nodded, using his small size to dart in and out of the villain's reach, delivering quick punches and kicks. The villain roared in frustration, its movements growing more frenzied with each hit. Kushina seized the opportunity, rushing forward to land a powerful kick to the villain's midsection. The impact caused the villain to stagger, but it quickly retaliated, swinging a massive tentacle towards her. She barely managed to dodge, rolling to the side and coming up in a defensive stance. Izuku, seeing an opening, grew back to his normal size and aimed a kick at the villain's core. The sludge villain howled in pain, its grip on Katsuki weakening further. For a moment, it seemed like they might be able to defeat it. But then, the villain lashed out with renewed fury, sending a barrage of sludge tentacles flying towards them. Kushina was forced to backflip out of harm's way, while Izuku shrank again to avoid the attack. "We need to keep him off balance," Izuku yelled, his voice high-pitched from his tiny form. Kushina nodded, her eyes blazing with determination. She launched herself at the villain again, this time aiming for its vulnerable spots. Her fists and feet were a blur of motion, each strike precise and powerful. Izuku joined her, using his quirk to dart in and out, landing blows wherever he could. Just as the situation seemed to be escalating beyond their control, a thunderous bang echoed through the air. All Might landed between the villain and the pair, his presence commanding and powerful. "Don't worry, young heroes, I am here," he declared, his voice resonating with authority. With a single, mighty punch, All Might shattered the sludge villain, scattering its remains and freeing Katsuki. The explosive youth fell to the ground, breathing heavily, his eyes wide with shock and relief. Izuku and Kushina watched as All Might stood tall, the remnants of the villain dispersing in the wind. The crowd erupted in cheers, their faith in heroes restored. Katsuki slowly got to his feet, his breaths ragged. He looked at Izuku and Kushina, his usual scowl softened by an unspoken gratitude. For a brief moment, his eyes conveyed a mix of thanks and a hint of respect. "Bakugo, are you okay?" Izuku asked, stepping forward. Katsuki didn't respond immediately. He dusted himself off, his pride wounded but intact. With a huff, he turned away, his voice gruff. "I'm fine. I didn't need your help." Izuku and Kushina exchanged a glance, understanding the complexities of Katsuki's pride. They knew he would never openly admit his gratitude, but the look in his eyes was enough. All Might approached them, a broad smile on his face. "You two were incredible. Brave and quick-thinking. You showed real hero potential." Izuku's heart swelled with pride, and he couldn't help but grin. "Thank you, All Might. We just did what we had to." Kushina nodded, her expression serious but satisfied. "Yeah, we couldn't just stand by." All Might gave them a thumbs up before turning to address the crowd and the gathered heroes. As the excitement began to die down, Izuku and Kushina felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had faced a real threat and emerged stronger, their bond as friends and future heroes more solid than ever. As they walked away from the scene, the cheers and applause still ringing in their ears, they knew that their journey was just beginning. The path to becoming true heroes was fraught with challenges, but they were ready to face them together. Later that evening, after Kushina had gone home, Izuku found himself walking through the quiet streets, his mind buzzing with the day's events. The encounter with the sludge villain and All Might's words of encouragement had left him feeling exhilarated yet contemplative. As he neared his neighborhood, he saw a familiar figure leaning against a lamppost, bathed in the orange glow of the streetlights. Katsuki Bakugo stood there, his usual scowl etched on his face. "Kaken," Izuku called out, surprised to see his old friend and rival. Katsuki looked up, his eyes narrowing. "Deku," he greeted tersely. Izuku walked closer, sensing that Katsuki had something on his mind. "What are you doing here?" Katsuki pushed off the lamppost and stepped towards Izuku, his expression unreadable. "You and that girl, Kushina," he began, his voice low and intense. "You still planning to go to UA?" Izuku nodded, his heart pounding. "Yeah, we are. We've been training hard for it." Katsuki scoffed lightly, a bitter edge to his laugh. "You think you can actually make it in? UA's no joke, Deku." "I know," Izuku replied, his voice steady. "But we believe in ourselves. We're going to give it everything we've got." Katsuki turned his back to Izuku, taking a few steps away. For a moment, it seemed like the conversation was over. But then he stopped and looked back over his shoulder. "At least you two won't slow me down like my so-called friends," he said, his tone dismissive yet lacking its usual venom. Izuku watched as Katsuki continued to walk away, his words hanging in the air. There was something different in the way Katsuki had spoken, less contempt and more a grudging acknowledgement of their efforts. "Thanks, Kaken," Izuku called out, his voice filled with a mix of determination and gratitude. "We won't." Katsuki didn't respond, his figure gradually disappearing into the night. Izuku stood there for a moment, contemplating the brief exchange. It wasn't an open admission of respect, but it was something. For Katsuki, it was as close to a compliment as he might ever get. As Izuku resumed his walk home, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path to UA was daunting, but he wasn't alone. With Kushina by his side and the fire of their shared dreams burning brightly, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The encounter with Katsuki, the fight with the sludge villain, and All Might's encouragement, all of it strengthened his resolve. They were on the right path, and nothing would deter them from becoming the heroes they aspired to be. Any thoughts, comments, suggestions? Let me know.